Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Cubic Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for July 2020. We wanted to do an update to the Cubic deck since the release of Duel Overload, just never got around to collecting all the cards for the deck profile. But it's a really awesome deck. If those of you have seen Dark Side of Dimensions, it was used by the main antagonist in the movie. Very fearsome looking creatures, all revolving around, the shape of a cube in some way or another, and just seeing a lot of different support in the form of fusion summoning or just, sending different cubic monsters to get out bigger versions of them to hit for some pretty high attack. And with all the different spell and trap card support we have for the deck and the new support we received in Duel Overload, I definitely feel an update was needed for the deck as a whole. Along with cubics, I am hoping to update Malefics later down the road as well. Just need to gather up some more of the support. Definitely a lot of Malefic support, definitely more difficult to collect than some of the cubic cards. But let's go ahead and get started with this deck profile. So for the monsters, I'm running 3 of the Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord. It cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from your hand by revealing 3 other cubic cards in your hand with different names, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. It's unaffected by other monsters, activated effects, whose original attack is 3,000 or less. And when this attacking card destroys a monster by battle, you can activate this effect, and this card can make a second attack during the battle phase. During your end phase, each player takes 3,000 damage, and you can only use each effect of Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord, once per turn. So it's definitely one of your main go-to boss monsters in the deck, being a true powerhouse alone, being very easy to special summon it out onto the field as well, and also one of the cards needed, 3 of it being the card to make Crimson Nova Trinity, the Dark Cubic Lord, our fusion monster of the deck, a quite fearsome fusion monster at that, which we'll go over when we get to the extra deck. But this card definitely needed 3, just for the fact that you run 3 of it for the fusion monster, but just the fact that you can hit your opponent for some heavy damage with both the effect damage and attacking with this card alone makes it quite fearsome in the deck at a 3 of copy. For more of the setup for a bunch of our other cubic monsters, I'm running 3 Duza the Meteor Cubic Vessel. If this card is normal or special summon, you can send 1 cubic card from your deck to the graveyard once per turn during either player's turn. If a monster was sent to the graveyard this turn while this card is face up on the field, you can make this card gain 200 attack for each monster with a different name in your graveyard until the end of this turn. So just with that setup for your cubic monsters in the graveyard, it makes it very, very strong. And the fact that it can also be a cubic card means that you can send some of your cubic spells and traps that you can then later banish for their own effects in the graveyard. So if you don't send the monster effects, you can always just use Duza for that setup of your spell and traps in the graveyard to use, depending on which one you want to send for the different effects you can do. And for the last of the 3 ofs, I'm also running 3 Vijam, the Cubic Seed. It cannot be destroyed by battle. At the end of the damage step, if this card battled an opponent's monster, you can place this face-up card in your spell and trap card zone as a continuous spell. And if you do place 1 cubic counter on that opponent's monster, monsters with a cubic counter cannot attack, also negate their effects. And if this card is treated as a continuous spell by this effect during your main phase, you can special summon this card from your spell and trap card zone. So you have other cards to set up Vijam, the Cubic Seed, which we'll go over in just a bit, but just one to help stall against your opponent, and then easily special summon back onto the field for you to use for other resources for the deck. So another 3 of, just for the fact that it's just very easy to special summon out and then just slow down your opponent and all of their different plays, making them go into other monsters with the monsters that have their effects negated after getting a cubic counter placed on them. For some of our other 1-ofs in the deck, I'm running 1 Buster Gundel, the Cubic Behemoth. This one is just a powerhouse by sending 3 cubic monsters to the graveyard. It cannot be special summoned by other ways, and it gains 3,000 attack if summoned this way. We have some other variants in the deck as well by sending, and that is Yugioh, the Cubic King. This one sends 1. Each one of these having the different effects for the setup as well, just for the setup for our Vijam, the Cubic Seeds as well, with these different monsters being able to target these cards in the graveyard, sending it to the graveyard and special summoning those targets, and then just having that recycle power by adding some of the other cubic monsters back to our hand as well. I also run 1 Blade Garudia, the Cubic Beast, and 1 Indiadora Doom, Volt, the Cubic Emperor, having more special summon effects just by having our Cubic Seeds set up for the plays on the field, then being able to send them for a bunch of these other different monsters to summon out onto the field for that power, and then recycle the Cubic Seeds back onto the field to reuse again and again for different cubic monsters to summon out that have the attack point boosts. And for more of our level 4 summoning, we have 3 Summoner Monk. I really do like this. It helps to set up our special summon by discarding a spell to special summon Duza, the cubic vessel, onto the field, which then you can use because it can be either normal or special summon to send another cubic card to the graveyard. And then also you have your rank 4 play right then and there using your Summoner Monk. And we have plenty of spells in the deck which you can discard for this card and then easily get the banish effect for those spells after they've been sent to the graveyard. So this is a definite staple in the deck. It's the only non-cubic monster I run, just for the easy setup it can do with all the other different cubic monsters we're running. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. I run 3 Cubic Karma. This is one of the continuous spells we run in the deck. When this card is activated, you can target 1 cubic monster you control, except for Vijam the Cubic Seed. Send any number of Vijam the Cubic Seed from your hand and or deck to the graveyard. Then that monster gains 800 attack for each, even if this card leaves the field. And during your opponent's turn, if Vijam the Cubic Seed is special summoned by the effect of a cubic monster, send this card to the graveyard. If you do half your opponent's life points, you can banish this card from your graveyard to add 1 cubic monster from your deck to your hand. So the setup that we spoke of with Summoner Monk to send this card for the discard, or even just having Duza send it to the graveyard, gives us another search for any of the other cubic monsters we want, and then also just being able to have our opponent's life and then rely on Crimson Nova for the attack damage and the 3000 burn damage. Could be game right then and there, but also just being the fact that it sets up all of our cubic seeds in the graveyard to then special summon back with all the other different cubic monsters we run, makes it a definite 3 of in the deck. And I also run 3 Cubic Wave. With this one, you target 1 cubic monster you control and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. The attack of that monster you control becomes double its current attack, and if it does, the attack of that monster your opponent controls become half its current attack. You can banish this card from your graveyard and any number of cubic monsters from your graveyard, then target face-up monsters your opponent control equal to the number of banished cubic monsters, and place 1 cubic counter on each of them. Monsters with a cubic counter cannot attack and also negate their effects. That's the scary part about the cubic counters, just completely shutting down your opponent's monsters. But this one, just giving your monsters attack and lowering your opponents, can also be just that game-winning play you use, because with Cubic Karma, having your opponent's life points, then setting up the power play with Cubic Wave makes it all the scarier depending on which cubic monster you have on the field that gained that attack, and then the face-up monster that your opponent had that lost their own attack. And for one of the new spells that we got out of Duel Overload, I am running 3 Cubic Dharma, another continuous spell. You take no battle damage from attacks involving your cubic monsters, so it makes it very, very useful for when we have our Vijam the Cubic Seed out, because then after we set up in the continuous spell and trap card zone, we don't want to take any damage since it does have 0 attack as well. But with this, you can send 1 cubic card from your hand to the graveyard if you do draw 1 card, so more graveyard setup for a bunch of our different ones, and hopefully drawing into something a little more useful than the card we sent. And you can banish this card from your graveyard, target 1 cubic monster in your graveyard, and add it to your hand. So more recycle power, making it a definite 3 of, for the fact that it is a brand new card that gets search power, and then just more and more recycle power from the graveyard, while having an awesome continuous effect on the field as well to protect our lower attack cubic monsters. And along with more graveyard setup, because a lot of these cubic spells just rely on being in the graveyard for their banish effect, I'm also running 3 Foolish Burial Goods, being able to choose whichever cubic spell we need for the send, since they all have the banish effect, makes it all the better, giving us basically an option for either, adding cards back to our hand, or just being able to place cubic counters, or even search out a cubic monster. Having all this search power with Foolish Burial Goods, then relying on Summoner Monk for sending another one from our hand, we can have multiple banishes for multiple searches and recycles using Foolish Burial Goods. And I also run 1 Reasoning, a bunch of different level cubic monsters in the deck. We'll definitely keep our opponent guessing if they ever want to go for the higher level ones, or even just, guess the number. There's still a big chance that they'll guess wrong, and we'll get that special summon for our cubic monsters, or just more and more monsters set up in the graveyard to use. And we do run a good amount of different Dark Attribute monsters, so I'm running 2 Allure Darkness. Now, this is mostly for the fact that I just need that 1 Summoner Monk on the field for the setup. So if I draw multiples and I have Allure Darkness, then I have an option to banish that card to get more and more draw power. I really don't like banishing many of the other cards for the plays. If I already went for my fusion play or just need that draw power more, then I like the Allure. If you didn't want to run Allure Darkness, you can always try hand trap options as well, 2 Ash Blossom or 2 Effect Veiler, just for more ways to stop your opponent's card plays. But the cubic counters really do make up for that, just being able to stop the cards on the field anyway when you place those cubic counters on them. But to stop my opponent's own hand traps and to finish off the spells, I'm running 3 Call by the Grave, just pretty much staple, I'd say, for the main deck to shut down a lot of my opponent's plays, for sure, depending on the hand traps they might try to use against me and my plays. And that is it for the spells. We'll move on to the traps. Now, the main way to get out our fusion monster is through unification of the cubic lords. Fusion summon 1 cubic fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as fusion material. If a face-up cubic monster is destroyed by battle or leaves the field, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon 1 level 4 or lower cubic monster from your hand or deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. And if you do, it cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects this turn. Now, I only run 1 of the fusion monsters since it does need 3 of the Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lord, to make. But this card, just for its graveyard effect alone, makes it a true 3-of, since we can easily get it set up in the graveyard with Foolish Burial Goods, or even just discarding it for some other cards, including Cubic Dharma, you name it. Just needing the 1-of for the fusion play. That's why running 3 of it is really, really good, because then you'll have it on the field to use for the fusion play, setting it up in the graveyard as well, but then being able to discard the other ones when we open up the multiples for that protection and just special summoning of other cubic monsters onto the field. And then for the additional trap cards we run, I also run 2 Cubic Causality. You distribute a number of cubic counters on face-up monsters your opponent controls, up to the number of cubic monsters you control. Monsters with cubic counters cannot attack, also negate their effects, as we've discussed already with the other cubic counters. You can banish this card from your graveyard, target 1 cubic monster you control. This turn, each time it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, and it has a cubic counter, inflict damage to your opponent equal to that original attack of that destroyed monster. Especially with Crimson Nova, that damage you deal, along with its burn damage at the end of the turn, can be game right then and there with your opponent, especially if you had cubic karma on the field to have their life points as well, with that cubic counter being that burn damage that could finish them off also. And to finish off the main deck, I run 1 Cubic Ascension. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon 1 Vijam the Cubic Seed from your deck. If you do, change the attack to it and perform damage calculation. If your opponent's life points are at least 2,000 higher than yours, you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon 1 Vijam the Cubic Seed from your hand, deck, or graveyard. Then only if your opponent controlled a monster with this effect that was activated, you can special summon up to 2 more Vijam the Cubic Seed. So this is just a great way to quickly get that card out to make use of. I'm only running 1 of it though, since once we get those seeds out onto the field, if we don't have other ways to recycle them, having an additional of this card for that setup in the graveyard doesn't really pop up as much as I wanted to during the testing also, but still like it as that 1 card to go for also, since it's also searchable and sendable to the graveyard. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 1 Crimson Nova Trinity, the Dark Cubic Lord, our main boss fusion monster. It must be fusion summoned with the above fusion materials and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Cannot be targeted or destroyed by your opponent's card effects. When this card declares an attack, have your opponent's life points. And when this card destroys a monster by battle, you can activate one of these effects. This card can make a second attack during the battle phase. If you do, effect damage that your opponent takes or equal to damage you took. So with this card having the true powerhouse of this play during the battle phase, if you take effect damage, the damage taken to your opponent as well, you can hit for some pretty high damage using your Crimson Nova Trinity of the Dark Cubic Lore with your other cubic burn cards that we already have set up on the field to use. Like I said, I'm only running the 1-of. Once you have that fusion set up in the graveyard, you really are only going to use the traps more for the second effect, and this card should just be the play you need to go for game against your opponent as well, not needing much other resources, and just needing that setup of the 3 Crimson Nova, the Dark Cubic Lore, are definitely difficult enough to just build up in your hand also. For some of the more generic extra deck monsters, I run 1 Link Karibo for the Cubic Seed. It's just an easy Link 1 to make and also set it up in the graveyard to use. 1 Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Cross Sheep for the fusion play and the Exceed plays when we make them with Summoner Monk, 1 Wee Witch's Apprentice, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Decode Talker, and 1 Boral Sword Dragon for some of the bigger Link plays. Also, for the Exceed monsters, I run 1 Daigusto Morale. The recycle power is why I do like Daigusto Morale as a card to use in this to recycle back some of the play sets of cubic monsters we use. 1 Gagaga Cowboy, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 number 39 Utopia, and 1 Utopia the Lightning to finish off all the Exceed monsters we run as well. And as for go-to plays with the Cubics, as long as you know your setup for sending the different spell and traps and which play you want to go for, with your main one being your fusion monster, setting up with your Duza, the Cubic Vessel, for your different spell and traps in the graveyard, along with the Exceed plays you can do with Summoner Monk. As long as you get that continuous search and power with all your different spell and traps, that is your main go-to play with the deck as a whole, making it for, just a fusion-based playstyle of sending other Cubic Lords to the graveyard as well, for a different fun and interesting deck for sure, using all the different Cubic monsters as that send power for your bigger Cubics also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Like I said at the beginning, also going to be looking to build Malefic, so can't wait to just, invest more into searching for those cards for that deck profile. It's definitely going to be another awesome movie deck to work on. But until then, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.